The spare room is yours, my husband Ethan told me after his pregnant sister and her husband materialized on our doorstep, unannounced. Either that, or you can move out. His sister Chloe couldn't resist adding with a predatory grin, "Frankly, it'd be ideal if you were gone by the weekend." So I left. But just a few days later, that smug smile had been wiped clean off her face, replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. "She's lying, Mom. Please, just tell me she's lying. Pack your bags and be in the spare room by tonight. Or just leave. It's your call." Ethan delivered these words while methodically spreading avocado on his morning toast, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather forecast instead of detonating our 8-year marriage. Over his shoulder, his pregnant sister Chloe was framed in the doorway of my kitchen, one hand resting on her swollen abdomen, her eyes already taking inventory of my quartz countertops. "Actually," she interjected, her smile all teeth, "it would be a huge help if you were gone by this weekend. We really need to get started on the nursery." The tech merger proposal I'd been reviewing slid from my grasp, a $30 million consulting deal scattering across the polished concrete floor. I stood frozen in my home office, my reading glasses still perched on my nose, struggling to compute a reality that felt like a fever dream. This loft, with its panoramic windows framing the Chicago skyline, was the culmination of 15 years of 18-hour workdays, of birthdays I'd missed and holidays I'd sacrificed. Every single square foot was paid for by my sweat, my strategic mind, and my knack for solving the kinds of problems that kept CEOs awake at night. "Excuse me?" The words emerged with a steadiness that shocked me. Inside, my chest felt like a cavern, as if someone had surgically removed every vital organ and left only a hollow, echoing space. Before we delve deeper into this unfolding nightmare, if you've ever felt sidelined or taken for granted by family who believed they had the right to dictate your life, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe. Your support helps bring these stories of reclaiming one's power to a wider audience. Ethan didn't even bother to look up from his toast. I, who could navigate a hostile corporate takeover with scalpel-like precision, was being dismissed like a temp worker. Just that morning, I'd been on the phone with my mother back in Michigan, sharing the news about the tech merger. I could hear the pride swelling in her voice as she called over to her neighbor, Helen, who was likely tending her garden next door. "My Amelia runs her own company, 15 employees." Helen, a woman who still thought a wife's highest calling was to iron her husband's shirts, had gone conspicuously silent at that. And now, here I was, standing in the kitchen I'd personally designed with custom Italian cabinetry and top-of-the-line Swedish appliances, watching my own husband, the man whose architectural certification exams I'd supported him through, whose crippling student debt I had erased, whose career I'd single-handedly boosted through my own network of contacts, casually kick me out of my own life. Ethan. I placed my coffee mug down on the counter with deliberate care, the ceramic making a sharp, definitive click. This is my home. I am the sole owner of this loft. "We're married," he retorted, finally lifting his gaze to meet mine. His eyes held the cold, calculating glint of a poker player holding a royal flush. That makes it our home, and family has to come first. Chloe glided further into the kitchen, her manicured fingers stroking my cabinets. "These will be perfect for storing all the baby formula," she mused aloud, already methodically erasing my existence from the space. Her husband, Finn, appeared in her wake, hauling 2 enormous suitcases, his trendy top knot catching the morning light. He offered me the kind of nod one gives to a doorman, civil yet utterly dismissive. "I have the Henderson presentation at 2, I stated, my own voice sounding distant as if it were coming from across the room. "The entire executive board is flying in. We're overhauling their European distribution network." "Well, you'd better get packing then," Chloe chirped, that hand beginning the circular, soothing motion on her belly that pregnant women seem biologically programmed to perform. "We need to get this place set up before my OB/GYN appointment this afternoon." The sheer absurdity of the situation crashed over me like a tidal wave. I had woken up this morning as Amelia Vance. CEO, owner of a $4 million Chicago loft, a woman featured in last month's Business Insider profile on female entrepreneurs revolutionizing the consulting industry. Now I was being told to pack my things like a freshman being evicted from a college dorm for a noise violation. Ethan had now moved on to slicing a banana for his toast, his focus as intense as a bomb disposal expert. This was the man who had wept at our wedding, vowing to be my partner in all things. The man who'd popped a vintage champagne bottle with me when I landed my first seven-figure contract. The man who had made passionate love to me on this very kitchen island just a few nights ago. Sterling Croft passed you over for the junior partner position again, didn't they? The question slipped out, sharp and venomous before I could censor it. His jaw clenched. That has absolutely nothing to do with this, but it had everything to do with it. For the past 3 years, Ethan had watched younger, less talented architects climb the ladder past him. He'd endured countless firm holiday parties where other spouses would eagerly ask about my company before politely inquiring about his work. He'd sat in stony silence, nursing a single glass of scotch, while his colleagues' wives gushed about my Business Insider feature. Mrs. Vance? Chloe had started using my formal married name recently, a subtle power play despite our supposed familial bond. The movers are going to need access to the master closet. Will you be leaving your keys on the counter? Movers. They had already scheduled movers before they had even bothered to ambush me. I glanced at the merger proposal pages scattered like fallen leaves on my floor. Each page represented job security for my employees, a future for my company, and a validation of every single risk I had ever taken. My phone vibrated. A text from my assistant. Goldman team confirmed for 2 p.m., very excited to discuss the partnership framework. I have meetings, I said, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. I have responsibilities. Cancel them, Ethan suggested, finally taking a bite of his perfectly assembled toast. Or you could just work from a hotel. You love hotels, don't you? All those business trips. The unspoken accusation hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. All those nights I spent building my empire instead of performing the role of the dutiful, adoring wife. All those conferences, client dinners, and late-night strategy sessions that had paid for this loft, for his Tesla, for the very lifestyle he had so comfortably settled into. Finn was now in the living room, using an app on his phone to measure the space, likely envisioning where their secondhand furniture would go. My furniture. My meticulously curated collection of mid-century modern pieces, sourced from galleries and exclusive estate sales. Each piece was a trophy, a tangible symbol of my success. The spare room, Ethan began, his voice taking on a placating tone. It's just a small space with a pull-out couch. It's a glorified closet with a Murphy bed, I finished for him. It's only temporary, he assured me, though his eyes told a very different story, just until they find their feet. Chloe let out a laugh, a tinkling, condescending sound that made my skin crawl. Oh, Ethan, stop it. We all know this is for the best. Amelia's never here anyway. She barely even uses this place. This home where I had built a floor-to-ceiling library for my collection of first editions, where I had carved out a sanctuary from the cutthroat corporate world, where I had naively believed I was building a life with a man who saw me as more than just a walking, talking ATM. My phone rang, and Harrison Cole's name lit up the screen. The London-based CEO who had been relentlessly courting me for the better part of a year, dangling an offer that would quadruple my current salary. I'd rejected him 4 times because Ethan had pleaded with me to stay in Chicago, had sworn that we were a team, that our life here was everything to him. I let the call go to voicemail, but I felt something deep inside me shift, like tectonic plates grinding against each other before a catastrophic earthquake. The silence that followed Harrison Cole's unanswered call seemed to stretch and fill the kitchen, tainting the morning air. I slid my phone into my pocket, the physical weight of that missed call, a heavy presence against my hip. Chloe had drifted over to the massive windows, her pregnant silhouette framed against the Chicago skyline as she appraised the view, no doubt calculating its value with the cold precision of a real estate agent. "Finn, you have to see this view," she called to her husband, who was still fumbling with their luggage in my foyer. "We could set up the baby's playpen right here, where it gets all the morning sun. My espresso machine, the one I'd imported from Milan as a gift to myself after closing my first major deal, was the next thing to catch her eye." She ran her hand over its polished chrome body with the entitled air of someone who had already taken possession. The machine that had fueled so many of my early mornings and late-night work sessions, my one small ritual of control in a life of constant chaos, was now just another asset in her mental ledger. Finn finally made his way into the main living space, and I noticed he was dressed in one of those billowy linen shirts that are meant to scream, "I'm a free-spirited creative," but really just whisper I'm allergic to a 9-to-5 job. His hair was meticulously tied in that absurd top knot, and he carried himself with the unearned swagger of a man who had never had to build anything from the ground up. "This place has incredible energy," he declared, as if his opinion held any weight. "Once we clear out the clutter and optimize the feng shui, it'll be the perfect environment to raise a conscious child." A conscious child. In my loft. A loft that I had paid for with capital earned by solving complex logistical problems for Fortune 500 companies, while Finn was probably leading a workshop on the spiritual significance of kombucha. "The movers will be here at noon," Chloe announced. Not to me, but to Ethan, as if I had already dematerialized from my own home. I told them to start by setting up the nursery furniture in the master bedroom. Nursery furniture? The words came out as a faint crackle. "You've already bought nursery furniture?" She turned to face me, her expression one of exaggerated patience, the kind you use with a particularly slow child. "We've been planning this for months, Amelia. Months. Didn't Ethan tell you? Months." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. I instinctively reached for the countertop to steady myself. I looked at Ethan, desperately searching his face for any sign of denial, of shock. Anything to suggest this wasn't the premeditated betrayal it felt like. But he was suddenly engrossed by a single coffee ground in the sink, scrubbing at it as if he were performing microsurgery. "How many months?" I asked, though a part of me dreaded the answer. "Since we found out about the baby," Finn supplied cheerfully, completely oblivious to the toxic tension suffocating the room. "About 7 months ago. Chloe wanted to make sure everything was perfectly in place before we announced the big move. 7 months of secret plotting. 7 months of my husband conspiring with his sister while he slept next to me every night. 7 months of lies, all wrapped up in ordinary mornings, routine dinners, and casual I love yous that were utterly meaningless. 'Show me the spare room,' I heard myself say, the words feeling alien in my own mouth. They all actually smiled, the 3 of them, as if I had finally seen reason. Chloe led the way with the smug confidence of a real estate agent who had just closed a deal, her expensive sandals clicking against my polished concrete floors. Ethan trailed behind her, still refusing to meet my eyes, while Finn brought up the rear, busily typing on his phone as if he had urgent business to attend to. The walk down my own hallway felt like a funeral procession. We passed my home office where the $30 million merger proposal still lay scattered on the floor. We passed the library I had converted from a spare bedroom, its shelves lined with first editions and signed copies from authors I admired. We passed the guest bathroom I had renovated to include a Japanese soaking tub, my one true indulgence after a particularly grueling year of building my business from nothing. "Here we are," Chloe announced, swinging open the door to what had, until this moment, been a simple storage room. The space was tiny, perhaps 8 by 10 feet, completely dominated by a dusty Murphy bed that looked like it belonged in a black and white movie. The room's only window looked directly out onto the building's industrial HVAC unit, a bleak vista of gray machinery and tangled pipes. The carpet, My God, I'd forgotten this room even had carpet. It was a shade of beige so depressing it was almost impressive. The smell hit me all at once. Stale air, old paint, and something else. The unmistakable scent of defeat. "It's perfect for what you need," Chloe said, and I had the insane urge to ask her how on earth she could possibly know what I needed. Minimalist. Fewer distractions for all that work you do. Finn peeked his head in, surveyed the depressing little box, and nodded with an air of profound wisdom. Very zen. You could really cultivate a deep meditation practice in here. A meditation practice, in a room that smelled of abandoned ambitions and looked like a prison cell with slightly better plumbing. "The bathroom is just down the hall," Ethan finally piped up, his voice carefully devoid of any emotion. "You'll have to share it with guests whenever we have them. Whenever we have them." He was already speaking in a language that excluded me, erasing me from the very concept of hosting, of this being my home at all. "Where am I supposed to put my clothes?" I asked, noting the complete lack of a closet. "There's a vintage wardrobe in the basement storage unit," Chloe offered brightly. "We can have it brought up. It's very authentic." I stood there blocking the doorway to that sad little room, and I felt something fundamental inside me snap, not break. Breaking implies damage, a weakness. This was different. This was the clean, decisive severing of a rope, a final cutting of a tether. The part of me that had always accommodated, that had compromised, that had made endless excuses for Ethan's fragile ego and his family's dismissive treatment of me. It just ceased to exist. "I need to make a few calls," I said, stepping aside to let them pass. "Of course," Chloe chirped, already heading back towards the master bedroom. My bedroom. "Take all the time you need. Within reason, of course. The movers will need to get into every room." Maybe sensing the atmospheric shift in me, the sudden absence of the wife who would normally argue, negotiate, or desperately try to find some middle ground. But when I met his gaze, really looked at him for the first time since this whole ambush began, he visibly flinched and scurried after his sister. I was left alone in that cramped, suffocating room, listening to their voices echo from the other end of the loft. Chloe was excitedly describing where the crib would go, how they'd need to baby-proof the windows, how my walk-in closet would be the perfect place for all the baby supplies. My walk-in closet, where my clothes hung in meticulously color-coded rows, where my shoes were arranged on custom-built shelves, where I'd installed a full-length backlit mirror that had cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. My phone buzzed again. An email from my assistant about the afternoon presentation, another from the Goldman team, confirming our meeting, a text from my mom asking how my morning was going. The normal world was still spinning on its axis, while mine had ground to a halt, reversed course, and was now spinning in a terrifyingly new direction. I walked over to the pathetic little window, stared out at the grimy HVAC machinery, and made a decision. It wasn't the emotional, reactive decision they were probably expecting. It wasn't the tearful, defeated acceptance they had so carefully choreographed. It was something else entirely, something that would require the same cold, strategic thinking I applied to corporate mergers. Except this time, the entity I would be restructuring was my entire life. The sound of furniture being dragged across the floor echoed from the master bedroom. My furniture, my life, being rearranged to suit the needs of people who viewed me as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle in my own home. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Harrison Cole's contact information. My thumb hovered over the call button as Chloe's laughter drifted down the hallway, bright, confident, and victorious. It was the laugh of someone who was absolutely certain she had won, who couldn't possibly imagine that evicting me was about to become the single greatest mistake of her entitled life. My finger stayed suspended over Harrison Cole's name as the morning sun began to creep across the guest room's hideous beige carpet. But instead of making the call, I put the phone down and made a different choice, a smarter one. If they wanted to play games with my life, then the first thing I needed to do was understand all the rules they'd been secretly playing by. The loft was dead silent at 6 in the morning. Chloe and Finn, being people without actual jobs, wouldn't stir before 10. Ethan had already left for his office an hour earlier, giving me a peck on the cheek that had the mechanical precision of a task being checked off a list. I padded barefoot through my own home, feeling like a ghost in rooms I had personally designed, and made my way to my office where our shared desktop computer sat waiting. Ethan had always been a Luddite. His passwords were all just lazy variations of his own birthday. It took me less than a minute to get into his email. My fingers were rock steady, a stark contrast to the seismic betrayal I was about to uncover. The inbox loaded, and there it was, a folder innocently labeled Family Matters. My stomach twisted. The first email was dated 3 months back. It was from Chloe. She won't put up a fight if we're smart about it. You know how Amelia is? She detests confrontation. Just frame it as a temporary thing and she'll roll over. Ethan's reply made my hands start to shake. You're right. It's not like she's short on cash. The business is booming. She won't even notice the financial adjustment. She avoids conflict like the plague. We can pull this off. A financial adjustment. As if I were a line item on a corporate budget that needed to be optimized. I scrolled through weeks and weeks of their plotting, each message a fresh cut. They had discussed the timing, deciding to wait until after my big tech merger was finalized, assuming I'd be too distracted to fight back effectively. They had strategized the approach. It had to be sudden and decisive, giving me no time to mount a proper defense. Chloe had even looked up tenancy laws, smugly concluding that as Ethan's wife, I would have very few rights if he chose to house a pregnant family member in need. Then I saw a message from just 2 weeks ago that made the air leave my lungs. It was from Ethan. I've been thinking about the trust fund situation. Amelia has to have some family money she's never told me about. Nobody builds a business that fast without some serious seed capital. Her dad died a while back. There must have been a huge life insurance payout. I'm going to do some digging. My phone rang, the sound shattering the morning stillness. It was my mom. A picture of her from last Christmas, smiling in the cashmere sweater I'd bought her, appeared on the screen. "Morning, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Amelia, honey, the strangest thing happened yesterday." Her voice had that familiar, worried tremor it got whenever she sensed I was in trouble. "Ethan called me. He was asking all sorts of questions about your father's life insurance policy, asking if there were investments or accounts we hadn't told him about." The room started to spin. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, sweetheart. That your father's insurance barely covered his final medical bills and the funeral. You know that. We spent every last cent on his cancer treatments." She paused, and I could picture her perfectly, standing in her small kitchen, clutching her favorite mug. Why would Ethan be asking about that now? After all these years, he's just confused about some financial planning stuff. I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Don't you worry about it, Amelia." Her voice sharpened with a mother's intuition. "What's really going on? You don't sound like yourself." I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell her that her son-in-law was trying to excavate our family's tragedy in a desperate search for non-existent gold. That his belief in my hidden wealth was so strong that he was willing to upset my grieving mother with questions about her dead husband's finances. "Everything is fine, Mom. I have to run. Early meeting." After I hung up, I turned back to the emails, my vision blurring. Not with tears. Those would come later. This was rage. A pure crystalline rage that made everything snap into focus. They hadn't just planned to take my home. They had planned to strip mine my entire life for any asset they could get their hands on. As I watched, a new message popped into Ethan's inbox. It was from Chloe. Movers are all set for noon. Their little secret was still safe. Back in the guest room, I pulled open my personal filing cabinet. Tucked away at the back, like a beacon of hope, was the Harrison Cole file. The London-based CEO had pursued me for months, offering a position as Chief Strategy Officer for his company's entire European expansion. The compensation package was staggering, including a sprawling apartment in Mayfair and a personal driver. I had turned it down 6 months ago, sitting in this very room when it was still just a storage space. Ethan had stood behind me, his hands on my shoulders, telling me how much Chicago meant to us, how we were building something special here. "Our life is here, Amelia," he'd said. "Our future is here." Our future. He had already been conspiring with Chloe to move her in when he spoke those words. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my spiral of sickening revelations. It was Maya, my best friend since business school, already in her tennis gear, her face a mask of barely suppressed fury. "We need to talk," she said, storming past me into the loft. She froze, her eyes taking in Finn's yoga mat rolled out in my living room, Chloe's stack of pregnancy books on my coffee table. "Oh my God, it's true." "What's true?" I asked, though I already knew. Maya had an information network that rivaled the CIA's. "I was at the club yesterday," she said, her grip tightening on her tennis racket. Chloe was holding court at the juice bar, telling anyone who would listen how she was finally putting that career woman in her place. She said Ethan deserved better than a wife who acted like she was the center of the universe. She said you were jealous of her pregnancy, and that's why you had to be handled. Handled like a problem, not a person. "There's more," Maya continued, her voice dropping. "She's been planning this since the day she got the positive test. 7 months, Amelia. She told her book club you'd probably try to claim mental instability from work-related stress, so they needed to act quickly before you had a breakdown that could complicate their plans." I sank onto the Murphy bed, which groaned in protest. They had pathologized my ambition, weaponized my work ethic, and twisted my achievements into proof of my own instability. The sheer diabolical precision of their character assassination was almost impressive. "What are you going to do?" Maya asked, sitting beside me. I glanced at the Harrison Cole file, then at my phone, where the screenshots of Ethan's emails waited like loaded pistols. "I'm going to give them exactly what they think they want," I said. "And then I'm going to vanish with everything they never even knew they needed." Maya squeezed my hand as she left, her final words echoing in the tiny room. "Whatever you're planning, be ruthless. And if you need anything, money, a place to crash, an alibi, you call me." After she was gone, I sat in that cramped, ugly room for exactly 5 minutes, granting myself that one small window of stillness. Then, I began the process of transforming into someone Chloe and Ethan had never met, a strategist who understood that revenge, like any successful corporate takeover, required meticulous, dispassionate planning. That afternoon, while Chloe entertained her prenatal yoga guru in my living room and Finn conducted what he grandly called a creative visioning session on my balcony, I slipped out. I had my laptop bag and a plausible story about a client emergency. Lying to them was disturbingly easy. I'd been learning from the masters, after all. My first stop was a small, independent coffee shop 20 blocks away, a place none of Ethan's circle would ever dream of frequenting. I opened my laptop and started compiling what I would later refer to as my Declaration of Independence. Every receipt, every invoice, every bank statement from the last 8 years was neatly organized in my cloud storage. The kitchen renovation alone had cost me over $40,000. The quartz countertops, the Swedish appliances, the custom cabinets that Chloe was now happily filling with her organic prenatal vitamins. The paper trail was overwhelmingly in my favor. The mid-century modern furniture from the showroom in the design district, all mine. The state-of-the-art smart home system that Ethan could never figure out how to operate, installed with my bonus from the Morrison account. Even the art hanging on the walls, pieces I had painstakingly collected from emerging artists who were now becoming household names, was all purchased with my money, every transaction traceable to my business credit card. My phone buzzed. It was Harrison Cole's assistant, a wonderfully brisk woman named Patricia, who spoke with the kind of efficient clarity that made complicated things feel simple. Ms. Vance, Mr. Cole asked me to follow up regarding your acceptance of the CSO position. The contract is ready for your signature, and we can have our relocation team begin the process immediately. How immediately? I asked, watching a young couple at the next table share a piece of cake, blissfully unaware that a marriage could detonate with no warning at all. We could have you settled in London within 2 weeks. The Mayfair apartment is already vacant and fully furnished. Your signing bonus of $250,000 would be wired upon execution of the contract. $250,000, more than enough to start completely fresh without ever looking back. Send me the contract, I heard myself say. I'll sign it today. After ending the call, I sat in my car in a downtown parking garage, just staring at the concrete wall in front of me. This building, where Ethan and I had lived for 5 years, suddenly felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum I'd been buried alive in. But now, I could see a sliver of daylight. I could feel the dirt shifting above me as I clawed my way out. The next morning, Tuesday, I met with my lawyer, Diane. Not just a lawyer, but a sharp, ruthless attorney who had helped me structure my business to be bulletproof against exactly this kind of personal implosion. Her office, smelling of old leather and even older money, was the kind of place where life-altering decisions were discussed in calm, measured tones. The lease on the loft is in your name, and your name only, she confirmed, scanning the documents I'd brought. Ethan insisted on that at the time, didn't he? To protect his personal assets from your business liabilities. She gave me a smile as sharp as a stiletto. The irony is delicious. You can terminate the lease with a 60-day notice, she continued, or you could transfer it to him, provided he qualifies financially. And based on the income statements you've shown me, he most certainly does not. Wednesday was all about the money. I walked into my private bank at 9 a.m. sharp, where my personal banker, Thomas, had been managing my finances for the past 7 years. Our joint checking account held a paltry sum, just over $3,000 for groceries and utilities. The real money, the serious money, was all safely housed in my business accounts, which Ethan had no access to. I need to close the joint account, I told Thomas, and I need to remove Ethan as a beneficiary from all of my personal accounts and policies. Thomas didn't even flinch. In his line of work, he'd seen every possible permutation of marital collapse. "Will you be requiring new cards, Ms. Vance?" he asked, his fingers already a blur across his keyboard. "Everything new," I said. "New account numbers, new passwords, new everything." The credit cards Ethan carried in his wallet, the ones he used for his extravagant client lunches, his golf club membership, his monthly artisanal cheese subscription, all of them were canceled with a few quiet keystrokes. By the time he next tried to use one, I would be an ocean away, and he would be left to stammer out an explanation to a skeptical waiter. Thursday was for the movers. Not for the move itself, that would come later, but for the assessment. I met the crew at a high-security storage facility in a quiet suburb, where they began cataloging every single item I intended to take. The list was exhaustive. Every piece was photographed, every original receipt cross-referenced. The moving coordinator, a formidable ex-military logistics officer named Dave, was clearly impressed by my level of organization. Saturday morning, 8 o'clock on the dot, he confirmed. 3 trucks, 20 men. "We'll have you cleared out in 4 hours, ma'am." That evening, I finally called my mother. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been sitting by the phone waiting. The conversation I had been dreading was surprisingly easy. "I'm leaving Ethan," I said. No preamble necessary. A long, weary sigh came through the line. Finally, she breathed, and in that single word, I could hear years of her biting her tongue. "That man never deserved you, Amelia. Your father never cared for him. Said he had weak handshake energy. Mom, I'm moving to London." A beat of silence stretched between Michigan and Illinois. Then, "How soon?" 2 weeks. "I'm going to overnight you something," she said, and I heard the sound of drawers opening in the background. "Your grandmother's pearls. She wore them when she left your grandfather. Did I ever tell you that story? Walked out on him in 1952 when she found him with his secretary. Took nothing but her children and those pearls and never looked back." The package arrived on Friday morning. The pearls were nestled in a worn velvet box, cool and luminous against the fabric. Tucked alongside them was a note in my mother's elegant script: "Wear these in London. New beginnings deserve old blessings. P.S. Your father left you something else. Check the bottom of the box." Beneath the velvet lining, I found a slim, sealed envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000 and another, smaller note. "Your dad's rainy day fund. He always said this was for when you finally decided you were ready to fly. Consider this his permission to soar." My father, gone for 8 years, was still finding ways to protect me. The tears finally came then, not in a storm, but in a quiet, steady stream. I sat in that horrible guest room, clutching the pearls of a woman who had refused to shrink herself for any man's comfort, and I wept. I wiped the tears away with the back of my hand and carefully placed the pearls back in their box. The check from my father felt like a tangible piece of magic in my hands, a final gift reaching across the veil to fund my escape. I stashed everything securely in my laptop bag, the one sanctuary of privacy I had left in this place, and walked out of the guest room to find Chloe directing a catering team in my kitchen. "Oh, Amelia, perfect timing," she chirped, not even glancing at me as she gestured for the delivery men to move toward my dining room. "We're having a little dinner party tonight. Nothing major, just a few of Ethan's colleagues from the firm. You don't mind, do you?" It was a rhetorical question. She had already laid out my grandmother's sterling silver, a wedding gift, on the dining table. My Waterford crystal glasses sparkled under the afternoon light, arranged with the precision of someone who had been rehearsing this performance for weeks. "Who's coming?" I asked, my voice flat. "Oh, the usual crowd. The Sterlings, the Crofts, that new junior partner Ethan's been trying to schmooze. Michael, I think. Maybe a dozen people." She finally turned to look at me, her hand making those endless, placid circles on her belly. "You'll join us, of course. Though, maybe you could eat in the kitchen. We're a little tight on space. By 7 o'clock, my loft had been transformed into Chloe's personal stage. She wafted between guests in an expensive-looking maternity dress, accepting compliments on her home with the practiced ease of a seasoned hostess. Ethan's colleagues and their wives mingled in my living room, admiring the view I paid for, sipping wine I had selected and praising the art I had collected. "Chloe, this apartment is just breathtaking," gushed Mrs. Sterling, the senior partner's wife, a woman whose social approval could make or break a career at the firm. "You have such an eye for design." "Thank you so much," Chloe purred, her hand resting possessively on my Danish teak sideboard. "We've worked so hard to make it a perfect nest for the baby." I stood in a corner, nursing a glass of wine I had no intention of drinking, watching this audacious theft unfold in real time. Ethan moved through the crowd with a newfound swagger, playing the part of the successful man of the house, occasionally shooting me a look that was a mixture of a warning and a smirk. "Excuse me." Mrs. Croft, another partner's wife, had appeared at my elbow, her voice low with confusion. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. Are you with the catering staff?" The ambient chatter didn't stop, but I felt the subtle shift as heads turned, sensing drama. Ethan started to move toward us, a placating explanation already forming on his lips, but I spoke first. "I'm Amelia Vance," I said clearly. "Ethan's wife. I own this loft." Mrs. Croft's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. Oh, I am so sorry. I just assumed, with Chloe acting as hostess? It's an understandable mistake," I said, my voice carrying just enough of an edge to make Ethan freeze in his tracks. "I'm staying in the guest room for the time being, to help Chloe and Finn get settled before the baby arrives. The ripple of confusion that went through the room was almost worth the searing humiliation. Almost. Mrs. Sterling's sharp, intelligent eyes darted between Chloe, Ethan, and me, calculating the shifting social dynamics. "How generous of you," she finally said, her tone suggesting she found it anything but. Chloe swooped in then, all bright smiles and practiced deflection. "Amelia's been so wonderful and accommodating. She works such long hours anyway. The guest room is really a much more practical setup for her schedule." The rest of the evening was a blur. I retreated to the kitchen, feigning a need to check on the caterers, but really just to escape the suffocating theater of my own erasure. An hour later, Finn found me there, his cheeks flushed with wine, his inhibitions completely dissolved. "You know, you're actually pretty lucky," he slurred, leaning against my Sub-Zero refrigerator as if he owned it. "Chloe wanted you out completely. Day one, on the street." "How fortunate for me," I murmured, watching him sway. But Ethan, smart guy, he continued, wagging an unsteady finger. He said, No, we need her rent money for a few more weeks, just until my next bonus hits. And then," he made a crude gesture, like tossing a piece of trash over his shoulder, "then you can go." The words landed exactly as he'd intended, not as a shock, but as a final, brutal confirmation of what I already knew. I wasn't just being replaced. I was being financially bled dry first, squeezed for every last drop before being discarded. "Interesting," I said, calmly filing this drunken confession away with all my other evidence. Finn then grabbed an open bottle of wine from the counter, a $200 Bordeaux I'd been saving, and sloppily refilled his glass. "Chloe's got it all mapped out," he mumbled. "Always has, even before—" He stopped himself, a flicker of awareness crossing his face. "Before what?" I prompted gently, but he was already shuffling away, muttering something about finding his wife. I watched Chloe hold court in my living room, watched Ethan accept congratulations on his beautiful home, and watched as my life was actively being rewritten, with me relegated to a barely there footnote. Then, at exactly 10:30 p.m., Chloe's hand flew to her stomach. "Oh," she gasped, loud enough to bring all conversation to a halt. "Oh no, Ethan, I think something's wrong." The performance was masterful. Julian rushed to her side. The guests parted like the Red Sea. Within minutes, they were on their way out the door, Chloe leaning heavily on her brother, insisting she didn't want to alarm anyone. "Amelia will handle the cleanup," Ethan called over his shoulder. "Won't you, darling?" The door clicked shut on their manufactured medical emergency, leaving me with Finn, a dozen bewildered guests, and the wreckage of a party I never wanted. Mrs. Sterling lingered behind, her keen eyes surveying the scene. "An interesting evening," she said carefully. She leaned in closer. "I knew your father, you know. He would never have stood for this." She was gone before I could reply, but her words stayed with me as I spent the next 2 hours cleaning. Finn had passed out on my sofa, periodically waking up to ask if I could bring him some water. The cramps, I knew, would magically vanish the second Ethan confirmed I'd tidied everything up. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Maya with a series of screenshots that turned my blood to ice. It was Chloe's private friends-only Instagram. The posts told a very different story. A picture of my loft from months ago, captioned, "Can't wait to raise our little one here." A post from 6 weeks ago, "Planning the nursery in our new home." A post from 3 months back, "So grateful for how everything is falling into place." This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was premeditated, a long con executed with the precision of a corporate heist. I had been the target from the very beginning. I stared at the screenshots until my eyes burned, the clock on my phone showing 2:47 a.m. Finn was now snoring on my sofa, his empty wine glass leaving a dark red ring on my coffee table. Normally, that would have sent me into a panic. Instead, I just left it there, a tiny act of rebellion. I walked to my bedroom window and looked out at the glittering, indifferent city. Saturday, I decided, would be my Independence Day. I barely slept, my mind running through logistics with the same intensity I reserved for multi-million-dollar mergers. At 5 a.m., I was up, showering in the guest bathroom with its pathetic water pressure. I dressed carefully. Black trousers, a white silk blouse, and my grandmother's pearls, which felt cool and solid against my skin. This was my battle armor. By 7:45 a.m., I was in the lobby, watching through the plate glass doors as 3 massive moving trucks pulled up to the curb. The doorman, Robert, who had watched my marriage unfold over the past 8 years, gave me a small, knowing nod. "Big day, Mrs. Vance?" "The biggest, Robert. And it's Ms. Vance now." At 8 a.m. on the dot, 20 movers swarmed the entrance. With the synchronized efficiency of a special ops team, Dave, the coordinator, met me with his clipboard. I had provided him with detailed floor plans, photographs, and color-coded lists. Green for go, red for stay. The red-tagged items were few and far between. Ethan's worn-out gaming chair, the miserable Murphy bed, and a hideous lamp Chloe had brought from her old apartment. "We'll start with the large furniture," Dave confirmed. "Work our way down to the boxes, 4 hours, tops, perfect." I handed him an envelope. "Coffee and donuts are in the truck for your team. They'll need it." The main service elevator began its steady, rhythmic journey. Up empty, down full. My sprawling sectional sofa, the one I'd custom ordered from Italy after landing the Morrison account, went first. Then went the dining table where, just hours before, Chloe had presided over her court of sycophants. Each piece that disappeared felt like a tumor being excised. Painful but necessary and long overdue. The noise finally woke the squatters. Finn appeared first, shuffling out in silk pajamas, his hair a mess. What is all this? What's going on? I'm moving out," I said simply, checking an item off my list as 2 men carried my bookshelf past us. Chloe suggested I should be gone by the weekend. I'm just following her advice. His face contorted as his hungover brain struggled to process the scene. Then he saw them carrying out the television, the 85-inch OLED I'd bought myself last Christmas, and a switch finally flipped. Wait, you can't take that. We use that." "You use things I paid for," I corrected him calmly. "There's a critical difference between using and owning." Chloe's entrance was far more theatrical. She burst out of my bedroom, their bedroom, I reminded myself, wrapped in a silk robe, her face a mask of pure outrage. Stop this right now. You can't do this." Dave's crew didn't even break stride. They had been thoroughly briefed on the possibility of hysterics. "You can't take everything." Chloe's voice hit a pitch that made one of the younger movers wince. "This is crazy. This is theft." I pulled out my phone and swiped to the Declaration of Independence folder I had so carefully prepared. "Would you like to see the receipts?" The sofa, purchased March 2021, paid in full from my business account. The dining table, December 2020, paid for with my annual bonus. The kitchen appliances? I looked up at her, offering the sweetest, most disingenuous smile I could muster. "It's all mine, every last stick of it." "But we live here," she sputtered, watching in horror as my art collection was carefully wrapped in protective blankets. "You live in a space that I am no longer paying for," I clarified. "How you choose to furnish it going forward is entirely your problem." Ethan was the last to emerge, and the sight of him was so pathetic it was almost comical. His hair was sticking up at odd angles, his shirt was buttoned wrong, and his face was bloated from wine and sleep. He took in the scene, the rapidly emptying living room, the bare walls, his sister on the verge of tears, and his expression cycled through confusion, comprehension, and finally outright panic. "Amelia, we need to talk about this. We needed to talk before you and your sister staged a home invasion," I replied coolly. "That window is now permanently closed. Let's just be reasonable," he pleaded, using the same line he always used when he wanted me to fold. "This is extreme. Extreme." I watched as 4 movers carried our bed frame past us. The California King, where he had whispered promises he never meant to keep. Extreme was telling me to move into a storage closet. This is just logistics. Where are we supposed to sleep? He asked, his voice full of genuine bewilderment, as if furniture just magically materialized out of thin air. That sounds like a you problem, Ethan. Perhaps Finn's creative consulting can help you manifest a solution. Chloe was openly sobbing now, her hand protectively on her belly, a gesture that had suddenly lost all of its power. How could you do this to a pregnant woman? To your family? Family. The word tasted like poison. Family doesn't banish family to storage closets. Family doesn't orchestrate secret coups for 7 months. Family doesn't treat each other like inconvenient tenants in their own homes. Dave, the coordinator, approached, his face a perfect mask of neutrality. Ms. Vance, we're nearly finished. Just the kitchen contents in your office. Ethan! Chloe grabbed her brother's arm, her voice shrill with desperation. Do something! Call the police! This can't be legal! Oh, it's completely legal, I said, pulling out the folder of documents Diane had prepared for me. Every single item being removed from this property was purchased by me, with my money, from my accounts. The receipts are all here. I even made copies for your records. The movers were a whirlwind of efficiency. My beloved espresso machine disappeared into a box. The smart home hub was disconnected, plunging them back into the dark ages of manual light switches. Even the expensive multi-stage water filtration system I'd had installed was unceremoniously removed. As the last few boxes were loaded onto the truck, I took a final look around the cavernous, empty loft. It looked huge without my life in it, hollow and echoing. Chloe stood in the middle of what was once our living room, tears streaming down her face. Finn had his phone out, probably trying to figure out how to spin this disaster on his Instagram, and Ethan just stood there, frozen, his mind still trying to catch up to the reality of his situation. One last thing, I said, pulling out the final document, the lease. I held up the lease agreement, watching the last of the color drain from Ethan's face as he recognized the building management's letterhead. This lease is in my name, and my name alone, I said. My voice as cold and hard as the polished concrete floor. You insisted on it, remember? To protect your precious assets from my business liabilities. I paused for effect. Building management has already been notified. As of Monday morning, you will be considered trespassers. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. The words hung in the dead air of the empty loft. Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. Chloe clutched her stomach, but the gesture was limp, defeated. Finn just stared, his phone still held aloft as if documenting the train wreck could somehow stop it. 48 hours? Chloe's voice was a broken whisper. But where will we go? I turned towards the door where Dave was waiting with the final inventory sheet for my signature. That, I said, is no longer my concern. You wanted me gone by the weekend. Consider your wish granted. The elevator ride down felt like an ascent, like breaking the surface after being held underwater for too long. Robert held the lobby door open for me as I walked out for the very last time, and I heard him murmur, "Well played, ma'am." My car was already packed with my essentials, my laptop, a few changes of clothes, and my grandmother's pearls, which felt warm against my throat. The drive to O'Hare took exactly 53 minutes. My phone rang incessantly the entire time. I had switched it to silent, but the screen kept lighting up with their names. Ethan, Chloe, Finn, and then, surprisingly, Ethan's mother, Eleanor. Eleanor Vance, the woman who had spent 8 years treating me like a second-class citizen at family gatherings, was now desperate to speak to the unsuitable daughter-in-law she had never wanted. I waited until I was comfortably seated in the first-class lounge, a glass of chilled champagne in my hand, before I listened to the voicemails. They were a symphony of spiraling desperation. Ethan's first message was authoritative. "Amelia, this is absurd. Call me back right now so we can sort this out like rational adults." His fifth message had devolved into pathetic pleading. "Please, we have to talk. You can't just leave us with nothing. This is your home, too. Chloe's messages were just hysterical sobs. You can't do this. We have nowhere to go. Think about the baby. How can you be so heartless? Finn had managed to leave only one, very confused message. Hey, Amelia? Could you at least text us the Wi-Fi password? We can't get online. But it was Eleanor's message that was the most telling. Amelia, dear, there seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding. Julian needs you to be reasonable. The family's reputation is at stake. Call me back at once. The family's reputation. Not a word of concern for my well-being, not an ounce of acknowledgement of their son's betrayal, just panic about how this would look to their friends at the country club. 3 hours into my flight to London, somewhere over the Atlantic, my phone connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi, and the barrage of messages resumed. But it was the call I received on Monday morning that brought the most satisfaction. I was just settling into my new apartment, sunlight pouring through the windows overlooking a quiet Mayfair Garden Square, when Chloe's number flashed on my screen. This time, I answered. Ethan said, "You have a trust fund," she sobbed, without any preamble. He said you had a huge inheritance, family money you were hiding from him. Where is it, Amelia? We need it. I took a sip of my coffee, made with a simple French press that required no instruction manual, and let her words hang in the air between continents. Chloe, there is no trust fund. There never was. You're lying! Her voice shrieked, laced with a desperation that was almost pitiable. Ethan said your father left you millions. He said you had secret investments, hidden accounts. My father, I said calmly, left a mountain of medical debt and a $50,000 life insurance policy that barely covered his funeral. Every penny you and Ethan have been living on, every piece of furniture you used, every luxury you enjoyed, it all came from my consulting firm, the business Ethan liked to call my little hobby at dinner parties. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, but, Ethan promised. He said once you were gone, we'd have access to it all. To money that never existed, I finished for him. He lied to you, Chloe. Or maybe he just lied to himself for so long that he actually started to believe it. Either way, you were conned by your own brother. The sound she made was not quite a cry, not quite a scream, but something primal and utterly defeated. We have nothing, she whispered. We have nowhere to go. The landlord locked us out this morning. Ethan's credit cards were all declined. We're sitting in Finn's car with all our suitcases. That does sound difficult, I said, surprised by the complete absence of the satisfaction I had expected to feel. There was just a vast, hollow emptiness where my marriage used to be. By Tuesday, the full collapse was underway. Maya, my ever-faithful intelligence source, called with updates. The story had ripped through his firm like a flash fire. The tale of how he tried to usurp his successful wife's home and ended up homeless himself. The Sterlings, whose dinner party had been my final humiliation, were apparently being very vocal in their disapproval. That new partner, Michael? He's telling everyone, Maya reported with unconcealed glee. The entire firm knows Ethan was basically a kept man who bit the hand that fed him. Chloe and Finn had found temporary refuge in a small 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown part of Queens, a world away from the Manhattan penthouse she had so confidently commandeered. Her Instagram had gone dark. The meticulously curated lifestyle she had broadcasted was now impossible to fake. The designer nursery she had planned for my bedroom would now be a cramped corner of a room that probably smelled of stale cooking and had a view of a brick wall. Ethan had been forced to move back into his childhood bedroom in his parents' house in Connecticut. A 43-year-old man reduced to living under his mother's roof with nothing but his wounded pride for company. Eleanor, I heard through mutual acquaintances, was utterly mortified. Her successful architect's son was now a local cautionary tale about greed and entitlement. On Wednesday evening, London time, I finally called my mother. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're safe," she said, her voice tight with worry. "I'm safe, Mom. I'm in London. I got the job, the apartment, everything." The silence on her end stretched for a long moment, and then my mother let out a long, slow breath, a sound that carried 70 years of wisdom and relief. "Good," she said finally. "And Ethan? The family?" "They're managing," I replied, which was a far more generous assessment than they deserved. 3 months had passed since that Saturday morning exodus. London had been a balm to my soul. My office at Harrison Cole's firm occupied a corner of the 32nd floor, with a view of the city that still took my breath away. My new team treated me with a level of respect I had almost forgotten was possible. When I spoke in meetings, people listened. There was no subtle undermining, no need to soften my edges to protect a fragile male ego. The Mayfair apartment the company provided was a sanctuary. I lived alone, cooked what I wanted, and decorated it exactly to my own taste. No compromises, no negotiations. I woke up every morning to peaceful silence and a feeling I hadn't experienced in years: contentment. My phone pinged with an email. The sender's name made me pause. Ethan Vance. The subject line read, "Please read important." My first instinct was to delete it. Curiosity got the better of me. It was a 6-page manifesto of regret, self-pity, and transparent manipulation. "I've been in therapy," he wrote, as if a few sessions could erase years of calculated diminishment. "I see now how I failed you, how I let my family's dysfunction cloud my judgment. We had something special, Amelia. We can have it again." The delusion was staggering. He wrote about our early days, conveniently editing out his constant simmering resentment of my success. He proposed marriage counseling, communication workshops, even suggesting I could keep my London job and we could have a long-distance relationship. The absurdity of it was laughable. "I know you're angry," one paragraph read, "but anger fades. Love endures. Love." The man who had conspired to steal my home and my money now dared to speak of love. I forwarded the entire email to Diane, my lawyer, with a single line: "Please add this to the harassment file. No response necessary." The final chapters of their story reached me in bits and pieces through industry gossip and Maya's detailed reports. Chloe had delivered a healthy baby girl. The Instagram announcement was a single grainy photo taken in what was clearly a cramped apartment. The caption simply read, "Welcome to the world, Isabella." The comment section, Maya noted with satisfaction, was conspicuously sparse. Leonardo, according to his LinkedIn, was now a freelance creative strategist, which was a polite way of saying unemployed. But Julian's fall from grace was the most complete. His firm had undergone a restructuring that had conveniently eliminated his position. Corporate speak for your personal drama has become a liability. His LinkedIn status now read, "Seeking new opportunities," but in the world of high-end architecture, reputation is currency, and his was bankrupt. Maya called one evening while I was making pasta. "You'll never guess who I saw at the grocery store," she said. Eleanor Vance, buying generic brand cat food and looking like she'd aged a decade. Ethan, a grown man who had cultivated an image of success, was now completely dependent on the parents who had expected him to be their golden years ticket. "And get this," Maya continued, "Margaret from the club told me Chloe applied for a job at Bloomingdale's. Full-time retail, can you imagine? The woman who acted like a job was beneath her is now going to be folding sweaters for the same women who used to come to her parties." I stirred my pasta, feeling an emotion I couldn't quite place. Not joy, not pity. It was more like watching a condemned building that you once lived in finally be demolished. A necessary process, but one still tinged with the memory of what it used to be. That night, I stood on my balcony, looking out over the London skyline. The city pulsed with an energy that felt like a new beginning. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "Your grandmother would be so proud. You didn't just escape a bad situation. You built a better one." She was right. They had wanted me gone, erased from the picture. But in removing me, they had removed the very foundation that held their whole precarious world together. I hadn't destroyed them. I had simply stopped propping them up. The tears that came then weren't for Ethan, or the marriage that was. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of finally understanding that walking away wasn't an act of surrender. It was the greatest victory of all. If this story of calculated revenge and reclaiming your power resonated with you, hit that like button. My favorite part was when Amelia revealed the lease was in her name only, but watching their faces when they realized the trust fund was a complete fantasy was a close second. What was your favorite moment of justice? Drop it in the comments below, and don't miss out on more gripping stories of betrayal and triumph. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.